Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Amanda Lamb. In today's deep dive conversation with WRAL Hidden History reporter Heather Leah, we're talking about an event that almost changed our state forever. Heather, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So in 1961, a military plane crashed in Eureka, North Carolina. That's near Goldsboro in Wayne County. Tell me what happened, who and what were on that B-52 bomber?
Well, the scary thing that was on that B-52 bomber were two nuclear bombs. And apparently during the 1960s, during that time, it was relatively common for military flights to be flying back and forth over North Carolina carrying nuclear bombs. And for the most part, there's protocol to protect us below. But in this case, there was a tragic accident that brought down the plane, including the nuclear bombs. And we were one switch away from having a nuclear mishap, is what they refer to it as today.
That is so scary. Tell me about the crew members. Who was on that plane and what happened to them?
Yeah, so there were 8 people on board. Only 5 of them made it home again. The 5 that made it home, they were able to eject from the airplane. 3 people stayed on board. At least one who stayed on board was the pilot, trying to save the plane, of course. And now what I hear is the people who were parachuting down turned around just in time to watch the plane start to break apart in the sky. There was some sort of just catastrophic error, and the plane fell, and so did the nuclear bombs. So North Carolina could have been hit by nuclear bombs that were stronger than the ones dropped on Japan.
Wow, that is so scary. And I'm sure the people that were parachuting down knew exactly what was on that plane, and that had to be terrifying for them. So one of these bombs was intact. A parachute kind of guided it to somewhat of a gentle landing. What happened to that particular bomb? How did they, get that out of there, and where is that now?
Yeah, so there are pictures that you can find online of them sort of taking that bomb away. They obviously had demolitions experts, nuclear experts, and all kinds of experts go to that scene in North Carolina. To put it in perspective, yeah, this is pretty close to Goldsboro. It's pretty rural, but there's still several thousand people out in that area that would have been vaporized if this had gone wrong. They sent experts out. In fact, if you look on satellite view today, you can see some of the places where the dirt is a different color because they were digging around and they were doing things out there trying to find the pieces of these bombs. One was intact. They were able to take it away. And the other one?
Not so much. So that one slammed into the mud. I mean, it was going hundreds of miles an hour, and then it kind of sank into this swampy area. What happened to that bomb? Were they able to get any of it out?
Yeah, so that's the one that there's still pieces of it in the dirt today. Many people, if you were to tell them that A, North Carolina was almost hit by a nuclear bomb, and B, there's still a nuclear bomb under North Carolina, they'd be pretty shocked to find that out. But this bomb slammed into the ground going hundreds of miles per hour, and they dug trying to find the pieces of this bomb. I've read that they dug about 900 feet into the dirt. And again, you can still see the dirt is a different color today from satellite view. And this is decades later. But they were not able to find all the pieces of that bomb. It was just almost vaporized. It was just broken into pieces.
And that spot today, I've seen some aerial pictures from your coverage. There's like a patch of trees there to mark the spot.
Yeah, so you can go and see pretty much the spot where that bomb is. It's basically a big grassy field and then this little patch of trees, and it's a very swampy area in that patch of trees, and the bomb is in there. It's on private property. The owners of that property have spoken in several historic documents and things. You can read about how they felt that night and the following days as explosions experts came onto the land and tried to find this bomb that's still under their family land.
Yeah, they had to be terrified. Well, we're going to be back after the break with more from Heather Leah about the big question that I have and everyone else I'm sure listening has. Why did these bombs not detonate, and what would have happened if they had? Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm talking with Heather Leah about what happened after 2 nuclear bombs fell from a military plane in Wayne County in 1961. So I understand there's some documents that were eventually released about this incident, referring to it as the nuclear mishap. So what have we learned from that and also from experts about why these didn't go off?
Yeah, so first of all, there is actually a historic sign that says nuclear mishap. It is in that area, so it's probably about 2 miles from the patch of trees. So they didn't put the sign right by the trees, but about 2 miles away in town, you can find the historic signage that calls it a nuclear mishap. So that's the official terminology for it, I guess. And as far as experts, so from what I've read and from what the documents said and what experts have said, we were one switch away. In fact, there's a quote that you can read where one of the people out there on the land trying to find pieces of the bomb pulls up the switch, and he says, "I found the switch," and they were like, "Oh, good, good, you found that. That's important." And he said, "No, it's not good because it's on. It's unarmed."
It was armed.
Yes.
So it's really hard to understand how this was averted.
The person I spoke with, who was Air Force themselves and had done a lot of research into this history, he told me there's not a good understanding of exactly why the bomb didn't go off. His response was, "The Lord had mercy on us that night."
Absolutely. Well, one of the things you think about is what could have happened. There's been talk that this was worse, could have been worse than Hiroshima or Nagasaki. What would have happened if these had detonated, according to the experts you've spoken with?
Yeah, so according to the people I've spoken with and the research I've done, these bombs were stronger or larger than the ones that were dropped on Japan. It would have been devastating. Now, one thing that I've heard is now this bomb, again, was dropped out towards Goldsboro, towards Eureka. If it had fallen there, it almost certainly would have destroyed Goldsboro. All the families living there would have just pretty much been vaporized. Thousands of people would have died, and then the cancer rates just across North Carolina would have been up for decades.
Astronomical. Right.
Now, if it had dropped in a place like Raleigh, this is to give you a perspective of the strength of this bomb, it would have fallen on Raleigh and destroyed Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill in one blow. That is the strength of this bomb if it had fallen.
That's really unbelievable to think about. And I know that the U.S. Air Force at that time was flying these nuclear bombs across the country on a pretty regular basis, as you mentioned in the first half. So this situation was really unusual because they did this on a regular basis and nothing bad had happened. But there was a fuel leak, correct?
Yeah.
And they were trying to get to Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. What happened?
Yeah, so again, it must have been terrifying, the responsibility that you carry when you're flying this plane. But this was a pretty standard outing until they sprung a fuel leak. And my understanding currently is that they don't really know why a fuel leak sprung. And in fact, the plane ended up falling apart. So something, again, went catastrophically wrong. But essentially, they're flying back towards Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, and they have a fuel leak, and they realize, well, this could be a more dangerous landing than we expected. They flew away from the Air Force Base to burn off some of that extra fuel, because if you're going to land, you don't want to have all that fuel to cause an explosion.
And they certainly don't want to do it at an Air Force Base.
Exactly, and with nuclear bombs attached to you.
Absolutely, yeah.
So they flew away from the base. They were right there, and they flew away to burn off some of this fuel and let this leak kind of play itself out. But unfortunately, I'm getting chills talking about it, as they got away from the Air Force Base, the leak became suddenly much worse, and they turned around and they started desperately trying to make it back to the Air Force Base.
And they couldn't get there in time.
Couldn't get there. And again, the 5 people parachuted, they ejected from the plane, and they described seeing the plane fall apart. So you have to wonder exactly what happened here, why this fuel leak that suddenly gets worse, and what caused the plane to fall apart. And I'm not an expert in those things. I just know the history. So
yeah, and it's
scary.
And like so many other things that you and I have talked about when we're talking about history, these are things that people just may not have any awareness of. even in that area, you see that sign, nuclear mishap, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
Because I didn't know this story until you brought it to my attention. So it's just really fascinating. Where can people see your stories?
Yeah, so if you want more of this type of hidden history of North Carolina, go to WRAL.com and just search hidden history.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Heather. This has been fascinating as usual. And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and making us part of your morning routine. If you like what you're hearing, please rate us on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast app you use. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email waiting in your inbox every morning with Triangle news, events, and headlines to get you ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.